Hey, Faith family, my name is Stephen, and I want to welcome you to our introduction of 1 Thessalonians. I hope you're joining along with us in our Bible reading plan, and this week we're going to read the book of 1 Thessalonians. In Acts chapter 17, the Bible records for us an event that happens in AD 50. Paul and Silas were leading a missionary team that left Philippi and went west to Thessalonica. They went into the city and began to preach the gospel. Thessalonica is a great port city in what would be modern-day Greece, and then the province of Macedonia, a Roman province. And they go to this really important city, begin to preach the gospel. As is Paul's habit, they go into the synagogues on the Sabbath. He preaches there for 3 Sabbaths in a row. And then, as is recorded for us in Acts chapter 17, they are explaining and proving that it is necessary for the Messiah to rise from the dead. And then on that 3rd Sabbath, Paul proclaims to them then, "This Jesus I am proclaiming to you is the Messiah." The Bible says that some of those that were there that had heard him preach the gospel over these 3 weeks turned to Christ and became believers in Jesus Christ. A number of the Jews, a number of the God-fearing Greeks, Acts 17 teaches us. But there's also something else that happens. In verse 5, the Bible says in Acts chapter 17, verse 5, "But the Jews became jealous, and they brought together some of the wicked men from the marketplace, formed a mob, and started a riot in the city." From this riot, they begin to attack the Apostle Paul and Silas and those that are with them. The believers have to sneak them out of the city overnight, and they then leave Thessalonica. They don't go back. They try to many times and can't go back, but they end up sending Timothy back. And then Timothy comes back to Corinth and makes a report to the Apostle Paul and Silas there about what's going on in Thessalonica. In response to Timothy's report, Paul is writing this letter. In chapter 1, verse 1, you'll see that this letter is from Paul, Timothy, and Silvanus, or Silas, another name for Silvanus. And so, as you read the book of 1 Thessalonians, think about a young church that was planted by the Apostle Paul. There is a persecution and affliction, not only for the Apostle Paul and those that were there with him, but now for those believers in Thessalonica, they're experiencing that. And Paul is going to tell them about that affliction and that they should expect that. And then he's going to respond to some of the issues that Timothy brings back and says the church is asking about these issues. So I want to give you 4 things to look for as you read the book of 1 Thessalonians this week. First of all, look for the pastoral love of the Apostle Paul. This is a church that he planted. And as you read this book, you're really going to be able to feel the warmth and the love that he has for this church. So as you read it, look for that. Secondly, I want you to look for Paul's customary thanksgiving. In these New Testament letters, there is a format that Paul often follows, and part of that is offering thanksgiving to God. Now, why would I call your attention to that in 1 Thessalonians? Well, here, Paul is focusing in 1 Thessalonians chapter 1, verses 2 through 10, on the treasures that the New Testament converts in Thessalonica are to him as a church planter. And what you see there as Paul is giving thanks to God for what he's hearing about these young believers and what God's doing in them, you really get a great picture of what Christians are to aspire to be, even in Paul's thanksgiving. So look for that as you read through the text. The third thing is Paul addresses the return of Christ. There's some that are confused about the resurrection and what it's going to be like when Christ comes back, and what about those who have already died. So look for Paul to address the second coming of Christ. As a matter of fact, in chapters 4 and 5, the end of chapter 4 and the beginning of chapter 5 is the longest single passage we have in the New Testament dealing with just the second coming of Christ. So look for that and learn about his second coming. Then finally, Paul is going to give some really plain instructions about the Christian life and how we are to live. They're very clear, they're very unambiguous instructions, and so it's very helpful for us. As a matter of fact, you're going to read twice in this book where Paul says, this is the will of God for you. So look for clear instruction about how to live as Christians. 1 Thessalonians is a great book. I hope you enjoy it as you read it this week. Thanks for joining us.